Okay. Um, Good evening, everybody. Quick one. I'm not going to waste much of our time. One of my students sent me a question which I've written on the board. She wants to know the difference between a coefficient and a power. So I will just try as much as possible to break it down real quick. Now, when we say a coefficient. Now, a coefficient is a number beside a letter. For example, 2x. The 2 beside the x is the coefficient of that x. 4p raised to power 2. Now, the 4 beside the p squared is the coefficient of that p squared. Now, the difference lies in the addition and multiplication of the same letter. Now, I want you to know that when you add the same letter together, you are going to get a coefficient. But when you multiply the same letter together, you are going to have a power. Now, what does a coefficient represent? Now, a coefficient uh, tells us how many times a quantity is added. For example, as we have on our board, x plus x plus x gives me 3x. Now it tells us how many times that particular quantity or variable has been added together. In our case, x has been added repeatedly 3 times. So that 3 is the coefficient of x. So anytime you add the same letters together, the same letter together with the same degree, please take note, especially when it is of the same degree, then you are going to get a coefficient. Why did I say the same degree? You cannot add x squared and x together because they are not of the same degree. The first one has a degree of 2, while the second one has a degree of 1. So you can only add the same letter of the same degree. Take note of that. So when you add the same letter of the same degree together, you are going to have a coefficient. And when you multiply the same letter, irrespective of the degree, whether it is x raised to power 2 times x, as long as it is multiplication, you are going to get a power. Now, like I said, a coefficient tells us how many times a quantity is added, while a power tells us how many times the same variable is multiplied or appears in the multiplication. Let me put it that way. A power tells us how many times the same variable appears in the multiplication. Now, what we are combining in multiplication is the factor. We are not adding the quantity, but we are only combining factors in multiplication. So when we multiply the same letters, irrespective of their degrees, for example, x times x, we are combining one factor of x times another factor of x. So we are going to get a power. So take note, multiplication of the same letter brings about a power, while addition of the same letter with the same degrees or of the same degrees brings about a coefficient. So when we add the same letter of the same degree, we are going to get a coefficient. Why do I keep repeating of the same degree? Is because you cannot add letters of different degrees. It has to be the same degree. So, because if you have x squared plus x, you cannot add them together. Your answer is still x squared plus x. But when you have x squared plus x squared, so we are adding the quantity x squared 2 times. So we are going to have 2x squared. So that 2 beside the x squared is representing the coefficient. Whereas that squared that you see represents the power. Please don't mistaken a power for a coefficient. Addition of the same letter with the same degrees brings about a coefficient, while multiplication of the same letter brings about a power. Now, a power is written as a superscript. Now, it is written on top of that particular letter or number, as the case may be, anyone, just slightly above that letter or number as a superscript, just as you have on the board. We have x raised to power 2. That raised to power 2 is that 2 which is written as a superscript is the power, and that first one, which is 3x, that 3 beside the x is representing the coefficients of that letter. At times you can have your coefficient as a fraction. For example, 1 all over 2x. That 1 over 2 is the coefficient of x. So I believe with this little explanation, you all should be able to differentiate between a coefficient and a power. And you know what brings about a coefficient and what brings about a power. Now, for the last time, or some really, when we add the same letter of the same degree, then we are going to have a coefficient. X plus x plus x plus x gives me 4x's. Now, if I multiply it, x times x times x times x, that gives me x raised to power 4. I am only combining factor. So multiplication of the same letter gives me the power. So that is all for now. Thank you.